What is your story of the creepiest thing that's ever happened to you? Story 1. I was working as a bartender at a hotel where a flight attendant had been murdered in room 354 about a year before the incident. Anyhow, it was close to closing time when the Maud, a very small woman, came into the bar and told me she needed my help. It seemed the fire panel was showing an alarm in room 354, which had been somewhat cleaned and left vacant since the murder. So, the two of us took the elevator up and started heading down the long L-shaped corridor. As we rounded the corner, we could see papers had been shoved under the door from inside the room, with "Help me" written on them. The manager put her master key in the lock and opened the door to pitch blackness inside the room. And we heard, "Thank God you've finally come." We both instinctively jumped back, and then saw one of our maintenance workers stroll out of the door. It turned out maintenance had been using the room for storage, and once he went inside, the knob had broken off on the inside. There were no lights or phone in the room, so he held his lighter up to the fire alarm. Story 2. When I was a senior in high school, a bunch of my friends and I used to drive into the hills to drink and get away from our parents. I was the designated driver one night and drove 4 of my friends back. 2 of the girls were really drunk and started puking, so we pulled over in a park. Both of the girls started puking outside my car doors, and then this pickup truck rolled up behind us with its high beams on. I thought it was the cops and was just waiting for them to bust us, but the person in the truck just stayed there. Eventually, we closed the doors and drove away. The pickup followed us. I started driving faster through a neighborhood I knew really well, taking every turn and speeding up, but the pickup kept following us. Eventually, my friends needed to puke again, so we pulled over. The pickup stopped behind us again and kept its lights on us. I looked through my rearview mirror and saw an older white guy with a beard. He started reaching for something in his glove compartment. At that point, I freaked out, told my friends to pull the others into the car, and floored it. We took a couple of turns and lost the guy. We stayed in the driveway of a random house for like 15 minutes and then decided it was safe. We turned back onto the main street, and the pickup truck was waiting for us. I drove as fast as I could down the main street, and the pickup kept following us. Eventually, at the bottom of a hill, there was a massive accident with a bunch of police cars and fire trucks. I started to slow down like I was going to pull over towards the police. The pickup overtook us, ran a red light in front of the cops, and I never saw him again. I have no idea who that guy was or what he wanted, but it was terrifying. Story 3. Gather round, boys and ghouls, and I will tell you the chilling tale of the twisty tie lady. I have posted this once before, but figured I'd share it again. Apologies in advance for the formatting, I'm on mobile. This happened about 12 years ago, when I was still living at home in high school. My parents purchased a condo from a family friend, and we moved in. The lady, the family friend's mother, we bought the condo from, had passed away of natural causes inside the condo. She was an older lady, friendly from what I hear. She also dabbled in sorts of witchcraft/black magic. I don't believe she was casting evil spells on anyone. It was more of a hobby, I suppose. So anyway, we moved in. Most of her belongings were left behind, so my parents kept the stuff they needed, mostly furniture and coffee tables. After months of living there, we had a suspicion that we weren't alone. Now, this wasn't your typical haunted house scenario. There were no flickering lights, strange noises, or lurking shadows that led us to this belief. It was twisty ties. Yes, just like the ones that come with loaves of bread you buy from the store. Every now and then, we would find these strange twisty ties around the house. These random twisty ties would seemingly appear out of thin air, almost strategically placed so they would be noticed. Like I'd be hanging out on the couch watching TV, go to the kitchen to fetch a tasty beverage, and come back to find a stray twisty tie just chilling on the coffee table. We'd find them wrapped around cords, on countertops, in desk drawers, even one time wrapped around my toothbrush. Each one was unique in shape, color, and placement. It certainly wasn't a shit your pants moment, but over time, living there, you'd start to look for it and anticipate it. There were 3 of us who lived there, and of course, we all blamed each other. And of course, none of us ever fessed up to it. Over the years, however, there were enough isolated instances each one of us had encountered to deny it. It was kind of fun, actually. We named her the Twisty Tie Lady, and I started to collect them in my nightstand drawer just for fun. I always wondered, why twisty ties? I tried extensive research on the web about twisty ties, and if they had any significance in witchcraft, but I found nothing. A few years later, after moving out, I learned that when the lady was alive, it had become a little inside joke between her and her daughter, the family friend, to save all her twisty ties for further use. I guess that was her way of reaching out in the afterlife. Sadly, the condo complex was wiped out by a flood. But to this day, every time I see a twisty tie, I smile. Story 4. I told this story about my parents' old house when I was living with them before college. I live in a small cul-de-sac in the middle of nowhere. The nearest neighborhood is over 4 miles away. One night, a few years ago, we got over 1.5 feet of snow overnight. Being so far from main roads and on the weekend, I knew our roads would remain unplowed for quite some time. I went to my back deck door to look at the snow-draped trees and the still heavily falling flurries, and to take some pictures, when I noticed footprints leading to my door and then turning around and leaving. I looked and saw that they came from my neighbor's side and thought that one of their delinquent kids played a joke, as my sledding tube on the railing had popped. I decided I'd wait until later, as it was early, to call their parents. I went on Facebook, and after scrolling for a bit, I noticed one of my neighbors closer to the entrance had posted, "Did someone knock for me or something at my back door?" I immediately called her, talked, and told her I had an idea. I called the first house at the entrance and told them what was going on. He went and checked, and sure enough, the footprints were there too. Everyone started calling everyone else. I called the family at the far end, and they told me there were none there. Then I got a call from my next-door neighbor. She had called the woman who lives next to the end house, and she said there were footprints that led to her door, but none that led away. We had already called the police by this point, but now we called them back and said it was an emergency. They told us the roads were still unplowed and that they couldn't send a plow truck to clear the way, as they are a privately owned company. The woman was losing it, so one of the husbands, a huge bear of a man, across the road from her texted her, saying he was coming over to invite her over. He came, and she left. We put up one guy's live feed motion recording hunting cameras facing all exits. Nothing came out. Around 7 p.m., a plow truck came as well as 3 cop cars. The couple she was staying with, and the woman herself, went to her house and stood in the doorway as the police searched. They found nothing. She begged them to keep looking, so they did. 2 of the cops went into the basement again. This time, only one came up. He took her to the side room, and we could hear hysterical crying. By now, we were all outside. A few of the other guys and I started toward the door when several police confronted us. They told us they had found someone hiding under a covered opening in the stairwell that she didn't even know existed. A few minutes later, a scruffy man, screaming and kicking, came out in cuffs and was led away. In his little camp, they found blankets she had just cleaned and put away. In the room next to hers, she stayed in other people's houses for a long time before going back. Even then, she wouldn't stay alone. She sold the house the next summer. He turned out to be a thrill-seeking junkie who was on probation for assault against a family member. The cops told us they believed he didn't want to stay at his apartment after a fight with his roommate and drove off in his roommate's car from the county over getting stuck in our unplowed roads. And that is why you always make sure you lock your doors. Story 5. I had just moved into a townhouse, my first place alone, with a door that opened out to the world instead of a hallway. It was literally my 3rd night there, and I was reading the story of Elisa Lam at the Cecil Hotel, a bone-chilling story and video to begin with. It was just a bit past midnight on a chilly October night. All of a sudden, someone started pounding on my door, like side fist, door-thumping kind of pounding. My dog, a lab pit mix, raced downstairs and started barking like crazy. I crept down slowly and slid up to the peephole to see an older, skeevy-looking dude, unshaven with gray hair and a disheveled mullet. Because he kept pounding, and also to let him know someone was inside so he wouldn't try to come in. Maybe not the best logic. I asked, "Who's there?" He growled, "Gas man." I said, "What? Gas man? I need to come in. There's no way I am letting you in. Miss, it's an emergency." "Yeah, there is no possible way I am opening that door. I'm calling the police." "You're really not gonna let me in?" No. I was watching him this whole time through the peephole, staying close to the door, so I could hear him over my dog's thankfully vicious-sounding bark. When he finally believed he wasn't getting in, he deflated and shuffled off. Fast forward 5 minutes later, and the 2 women who lived next door knocked. It really was the gas man, but who calls themselves that? There was a gas leak, and they needed to check my place. Story 6. I was walking at 10 p.m. at night in a park that had a forest trail with some friends to ghost hunt. We were a group of about 10 people. Anyway, I kept hearing footsteps behind me and near us, but nobody was there. I was in the back of the group since no one wanted to be there. You know, human shields and all. So I was more in the open, trailing behind a bit with a partner, when out of nowhere I heard a loud, blood-curdling scream. It sounded like a girl screaming bloody murder. It surprised me because I didn't expect it, and I jumped on the spot. I glanced at the scaredy cat of the group, no reaction. I glanced at my partner in the group, still no reactions. So I just shook it off. But then I heard children laughing and more footsteps away from us in the direction where I heard the scream. Nobody was there. After that, we reached a dead end, turned back, and left the trail. I asked my friends if they had heard the scream, and they all gave me a blank look. "What scream?" one of them asked. So I told them what happened, and it was confirmed that no one else had heard it. A few years later, I decided to look up the park, and it turns out a girl was shot and killed in that park. My condolences to that girl. There have also been reports of other people hearing children at night, even though there are no children outside past curfew. Story 7. My ex and I were renting a small, older house built in the 1900s. The back door had a vestibule, where you could either enter the basement door or the back door leading to the dining room. This door had a long window pane, and we used a stretch curtain to cover it. My ex had some emotional issues, and when we moved into this location, things worsened for her. One night, during one of her fits of screaming at me, we began hearing a slamming sound coming from the vestibule. We got down on the floor and peered through the uncovered bottom window pane and saw the basement door swinging open and slamming violently, with no clear pattern. Slam, slam, slam. Then, we heard and felt a very hard slam on the floor, as if someone had taken a sledgehammer to the ceiling below us. I got up, slowly opened the door, and the basement door opened once more, then stopped moving. I grabbed a flashlight and headed downstairs into the old dirt floor, rock foundation basement. Freaked out, I went down the stairs, expecting someone to jump out, but no one did. It was dead quiet. I returned upstairs and locked all the doors. Nothing else happened that night, and soon after, my ex and I split up. I stayed at that house for another year, and once she left, I felt much more comfortable. I don't know if I believe in the paranormal, but I can't explain what happened that night. I can't shake the feeling that there was some kind of energy reacting to my ex's negative energy. I'll add that I stayed in that house through hurricane-force winds, and that door never budged. Story 8. I once had to work a very late shift at the funeral home to prepare a body for a viewing the following morning. I think I finally finished my work around midnight. Anyway, it was winter, and I ended up getting snowed in at the funeral home. I had to stay the night until the plows came early in the morning to clear the roads. Let me tell you, it's incredibly creepy, sleeping in a funeral home, knowing there are 20 dead people in the basement. Story 9. Ran into a bear. Ran into a bear. I was visiting a relative down in Florida. I wasn't used to nights being so warm and balmy, so I went for a walk around 9:30 p.m. The neighborhood was pretty nice, so I wasn't worried. No one told me there were black bears around and that they like to go through people's garbage. So, I'm walking on the sidewalk, crossing someone's driveway, with 2 cars parked on it, and I'm about to walk past the first car. Meanwhile, Mr. Bear was just leaving after a good scrouge, hidden between the 2 cars, and about to make his exit. As fate would have it, our paths crossed at exactly the wrong moment. He walks out from between the cars just as I'm walking past them, and I actually bump into the damn thing. For about half a second, my brain went, no way that just happened. And I like to think Mr. Bear was thinking the same thing because neither of us immediately reacted. Then, I either broke the world record for backward leaping, or briefly unlocked my latent mutant teleporting ability because I zipped back 15 feet and ran for dear life. No idea what the bear did. I didn't dare look back. I assume he didn't give chase because those things are faster than they look, and he definitely would have caught me. Maybe he was too full of garbage to bother, or maybe he was used to humans in the area and didn't care, or maybe he was just laughing his bear ass off. Regardless, I've never run so fast in my entire life. Story 10. When I was younger, I lived by the woods and could see a cemetery from my back porch. One Easter, I woke up and saw the Easter Bunny, a terrifying costume, and I distinctly remember the smell of wet hay. I didn't tell anyone about it, but there was an extra Easter egg in the house that my parents hadn't hidden. Years later in high school, I asked my parents if they had ever dressed up like the Easter Bunny and come into our room. They said no, and that they would never go through that much trouble. Then my younger sister, who I shared a bunk bed with at the time, said she also remembered seeing the Easter Bunny and commented about the smell of hay. We were both terrified that we remembered the same thing. To make it even weirder, I told my friends at lunch what happened, and one of my neighbors mentioned that she had once seen the Easter Bunny standing in her driveway at night. That story gave me chills. To this day, I'm terrified of people in rabbit costumes. Story 11. This isn't next level creepy, but it definitely freaked me out. I was walking to the bus stop one morning during my first semester at university. I had started going by my middle name at that point. Some guy I had never seen before crossed my path, looked me square in the eye, and yelled my full name. I was super stressed and sleep-deprived at the time, so I'm still unsure if it really happened or if I hallucinated it. Story 12. I lived in a house that had periodic ghost activity. One night, my hair got tugged twice, and I used to hear footsteps in my room upstairs a couple of times a week. It sounded like someone wearing leather-soled shoes on a wooden floor. At first, it was terrifying, and I started sleeping with the lights on. But after a couple of weeks, it became annoying, and eventually, I either got used to it or the activity stopped. Story 13. Everyone has that one rich neighborhood you go to for king-sized candy bars on Halloween. When I was about 13 or 14, my friends and I were out late in one of those neighborhoods. As we finished up on one of the last streets, there was hardly anyone left on the sidewalks, and the lights were going out on the houses. Then, out of nowhere, a figure in a black cloak, dragging a metal snow shovel, started walking briskly towards us. The scrape of metal on the ground sent chills down my spine. The figure then broke into a sprint, heading straight for us. Hearing that sound and seeing a black figure running at us in the dark, I'll admit, I almost created my own candy bar in my pants that night. Story 14. When I was around 12 years old, I was hanging out downstairs watching TV on the couch. My dog, a fluffy, friendly little Bichon, was relaxing across the room. Out of nowhere, he stood up, completely alert, and started growling with his hackles raised, staring at the staircase. His gaze followed something invisible from the staircase, across the room, and ended up fixating right next to me. His growl intensified, and he was practically snarling, which he never did. He was usually the sweetest, most non-threatening dog. I don't know if it was just my imagination, but I was pretty sure I felt a sudden coldness next to me at that moment. Freaked out, I grabbed the dog, sprinted across the room, and ran upstairs. Nothing like that ever happened again, but my mom still lives in that house. Story 15. Does something happening every day for 13 years count as supernatural? My childhood home definitely had something strange going on. Every day, you could hear the faint, indistinct voices of a man and a woman having a conversation, though you could never quite make out their words. The sounds were loudest in my room. Coincidentally or not, my room was also the one where, about a century ago, a man reportedly shoved his daughter out of the window. There are so many other creepy things about that house, but those ghostly conversations are what stayed with me the most.